Okay, Bruchim Habayim, welcome everyone. We're continuing on Halachot of Shabbat, Siman Resh Mem Het, and we're up to Seif Gimel of these Halachot. Says Shulchan Aruch, Echad mutar laflik me'erev Shabbat, im ichnas besfina me'erev Shabbat v'kana ba shvita, af al pi shemafleget b'Shabbat mutar. Now, there are times that a person could actually be traveling on a boat on Shabbat. There are a number of requirements for it, but writes the Shulchan Aruch, the items that will be mutar for travel on Erev Shabbat, if you already entered the boat, the ship, on Erev Shabbat, and you acquired your shvita, which means it gets into halachot of eruvin and tchumim, but if you already anchored yourself down, so to speak, for staying in the boat on Shabbat already from Friday, even though that the boat's going to travel on Shabbat, will be mutar. That's provided that you don't get out and then now want to get back in on Shabbat. Even though that you already set yourself up for staying in the sfina, in the ship on Shabbat, you can't go out and then go back in on Shabbat before the travel, because that already becomes a Siman Shin Lametet problem of a person that looks like he is Shat al Pnei Hamayim, that travel and swimming on Shabbat, that becomes a different gezerah, unrelated to this Siman, but nevertheless still there. Now, in order for a person to be able to travel on Shabbat, you need 4 different requirements in halakha. That you're going for a dvar mitzvah. You're going to do a mitzvah, not just a regular travel, a mundane personal trip. Second would be that from the bottom of the ship to the bottom of the river, there is at least 10 tfachim of distance. This way you get around the issue of tchumin on Shabbat, because on Shabbat you're not supposed to go out of your 2,000 amot, or even on a more serious level, it could be tchumin deoraita, but even that you could pass quickly after a few miles of travel, depending if you're going on a ship in the river. Very easily you could surpass the tchumin, even the deoraita level. So that only is applicable if you're attached to the ground. Within 10 tfachim from the ground, which is the karkait of the river or the sea, that will be considered that you're attached to the ground. You're still within the lemala and tchumin lemala ma'asara. Above 10 tfachim from the ground, it's no tchumin. So if you are floating in the air or in the water above the ground level, then you surpass that requirement, and that would be the second thing that you need to get around the issue of tchumin. The third one is that the ship belongs to a goy and the majority of passengers are goyim. This way you get around the other issues of a goy doing things for you, or a Jew working on Shabbat, and so on. And the fourth and final one is that you are entering the ship on Erev Shabbat, and you sit there the entire time of Ben Hashmashot. That's how you are koneh shvita. That's how you acquire a place for yourself in that ship, and that gets around the getting into the ship and traveling on Shabbat as well. Now, there are places, is brought in the poskim, that their minhag was they would enter the ship on Erev Shabbat, and they would stay the entire Ben Hashmashot, and then they would go home. They would have Shalom Aleichem, Shetchayil, like a Kiddush and Suda, there's a Mirot Shabbat. They would go to sleep at home. Tomorrow morning on Shabbat, they would wake up and go to the ship to travel. Right? It makes sense. So, check all the boxes. Like, I was koneh shvita in the ship. It belongs to the goy. All the checks. is that something that's viable in halakha? If they have a minhag like that, Chacham Obadia writes that you don't have to stop them. You can't yell at them, so to speak. They have what to rely on because they technically check all the boxes, but you have again a problem of perhaps marit ayin, which is discussed in Siman Shilametet, as we mentioned just moments ago. So that is obviously also provided that there's no Chilul Shabbat involved with getting to the ship on Shabbat itself. That's of course goes without saying. But inside the ship, when you're there, you could go everywhere that you want. You're not bound to 4 amot on Shabbat. Even though that he goes out of the Tchum, you still could go the entire ship up, down, and across the borders of the ship. You could travel. You're not bound to only 6 feet around you. That's again, those who know Hilchot Tchumin a little bit more, they know that is not so simple. L'maaseh, in a regular case of someone that goes outside his Tchum, but in the case of the ship, the entire ship is considered basically one domain of its own, and therefore you're good to go. Now, what if you cannot stay on a ship on Friday afternoon? It travels in the morning, Shabbat morning, and they won't let you on board before the boarding time. They're not just going to knock, you go there before Shkia and you stay there for Berash Mashod, and then you get out. You can't do that. In such case, or for instance, sometimes the ship itself comes to the port after Shabbat already has entered. So it wasn't even there by the port by Friday afternoon. So it comes there, it unloads and loads and gets ready, and Shabbat morning or afternoon, it starts the new travel. In those cases that they don't let you, or you didn't have it available, then you have to ask a question, because there are many different complexities there. Again, nowadays these things don't happen to be very applicable because of the plane rides. For serious travels, the only thing that you have is really cruise, which really is not Sorach Mitzvah, so it's a non-starter really in most of these scenarios. So with that said, the Ramah adds, V'yesh omrim dafilu yatsa min asfina shari. Even though that you got out of the ship, still is mutar to come back to Machash Kana Bashvita once you already have acquired a place for yourself in on Erev Shabbat, staying there from before Shkia until Set, the entire duration of Ben Hashmashot, then you could go back. It's mutar. Achar kach likanas b'Shabbat u'laflig. Yesh osim kiddush basfina. There are those who do a little bit more. They do the kiddush on Friday night in the ship. Then they go home. They have Suda in the ship. They go home, sleep, and then they come back. Fine. Again, everyone should do as their Mora Hora says. Again, these cases are not necessarily that relevant. That's the minhag of many places, and you don't have to necessarily stop them from doing what they're doing. Now, Reb Chaim Pentermoli from Izmir, he's in his fantastic Sefer Petach Hadvir over here in our Siman and Seif Katan Chet writes to discuss if you have a shaliach, you're busy, you want to send somebody else to be konesh vita. Can you do such a thing? Can I send my brother-in-law? Say, you know what? I'm very busy. I'm a rabbi. I have to finish my drasha and everything. You go stay in the ship for me, right? You go stay there for Berash Mashot, right? And then you come back. It will be my shvita. Normally speaking, that's a mitzvah shebegufo. I can't tell you to go to sleep in the sukkah for me, even though that I saw years ago that the Belzer Rebbe, many of, I don't want to get into too much of the discussion over here for why he was not sleeping in the sukkah himself, but he appointed somebody to do it for him. But really, in the mitzvah shebegufo, I can't tell you to put tefillin for me, meaning not on me, but do it. You can't do that. Any mitzvah that you have to do yourself, you cannot appoint a shliach. Is this a mitzvah of such nature that I have to be konesh shvita for myself? I have to acquire that dwelling status on my own, or can I appoint a shliach? That's what the Petach Dvir declares, a chakira, a she'ela of such nature, and he brings many of the poskim back and forth, and he at the end says that according to Shulchan Aruch, according to Maran, you cannot do through anybody else. You have to be there on Erev Shabbat, Ben Hashmashot, stay there, and only you could be konesh shvita for yourself, not anybody else. And once you hold, and Maran Shulchan Aruch holds like that, then of course when you go out of the boundaries of the ship, your shvita that you were koneh is nullified. It's null and void. So that poses a whole question, and this Ramah that we just mentioned right now. But again, as we mentioned before, you have what to rely on. You don't have to yell at the people who do that. Once again, we don't want to discuss a lot of the details over here because these are less relevant. But if someone is indeed getting on a cruise on Shabbat, or from Erev Shabbat even for that matter, is something serious that they should sit with a Morora and discuss all the halachot of traveling on Shabbat in that scenario. So says the Shulchan Aruch Sif Dalet, Hayotzim b'she'ara b'midbar. How about when you traveling on a caravan, right? And caravans don't stand still. It's not no such a thing as a caravan staying for Shabbat, resting in the midbar. You're in danger of so many different elements when you're exposed in the midbar. You could have a sandstorm and be buried alive. You could be attacked by bandits. You could run out of water and die out of hunger or thirst. It's a real risk. So when they had the gada, hence you say the bracha gomel when you come back from holchei midbarot. So they're not going to wait for you necessarily. They're not going to wait for you necessarily. So hayotzim b'she'ara b'midbar. If you're traveling with a caravan through the desert, everyone knows that you do whatever you need to do in order for the travel to be safe. And Chilul Shabbat is part of what is done for survival and the success of the travel of a caravan. They sakana to stay. You cannot stay alone and say, "Oh, you guys go. I'm going to stay here behind one day, and then I'm just going to catch up." There's no such a thing, right? No compasses. There's no, you cannot do that. So therefore, Shlosha yamim kodem Shabbat asurim latzet, because you know that you're going to end up doing Chilul Shabbat within the 3 days prior to Shabbat, and we discussed that already. There are going to many that the Vinagaon brings many Rishonim that includes Shabbat itself. That means Shabbat, Friday, Thursday. Shabbat, Friday, Thursday is considered 3 days before Shabbat. You cannot, and according to some poskim, even Wednesday. So whatever is considered 3 days before Shabbat, you cannot start your travel because you know good and well that you're going to come to Chilul Shabbat, and that is not something that you should do approaching Shabbat, which is 3 days before Shabbat. All of the 3 days prior Shabbat, you are obligated to see to it that Chilul Shabbat does not come through your hand. But, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, you don't have that same level of obligation to not make any decisions that may bring you to Chilul Shabbat. So therefore, it is okay to go on those beginning days of the week. So you see from here that Maran Shulchan Aruch considered 3 days before Shabbat to be more mahmir and not counting Shabbat. So Maran holds that 3 days before Shabbat means Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. All of those you cannot start the travel, but Sunday, Monday, Tuesday are the days that you could travel. And if it happens to so be that you get into a situation of sakana and you need to be mechal Shabbat, so be it. You do what you do. For you, at that moment that you are undergoing sakana, is a mitzvah to be mechal Shabbat. Certainly mutar. And the fact that you decided to put yourself into a situation in which sakana may happen on Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, that's fine. Because you're not obligated yet to start being careful about, extensions of this nature for making sure you don't make a decision that may end up in Chilul Shabbat. So it says the Shulchan Aruch, Ve'en kan Chilul. This is not considered Chilul. Now, if you're making aliyah, to Eretz Yisrael, if you find a caravan that's going to Eretz Yisrael, even on Erev Shabbat, even though that caravans usually you cannot do Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, so even though that this is Friday, it's the worst, still mutar. Kevan de bar mitzvah, you're going for the bar mitzvah, yachol lifrosh, you could go with them. You do make your conditions that they should stop on Shabbat. Of course, they're not going to necessarily listen to that. If they break their words and afterwards they say, no, we can't stop, we have to go, you could go with them even on Shabbat, outside of the tchum, because it is dangerous to stay put where you are alone when your caravan is leaving, so therefore you travel with them to ensure your safety and security, and that's fine, that's mutar, because you're going to Surah Mitzvah, even though that it is on Friday. If you entered a city on Shabbat, you could walk through the whole city, right? If it was mutar for you to enter the city, then you could walk the whole city. Now, if a person walks out of the tchum and he finds himself out of the tchum, he remembers, oops, I'm out of the tchum. You only could walk 4 amot. That's the halacha. But that's only if you're outside the city. Once you enter the city, the entire city is considered like a 4 amot, right? And therefore, once you had allowance to walk through the midbar and get to this city because of pikuach nefesh, once you get in the city, we don't say, 4 amot only. No, you could go throughout the whole city. You could go find a place to sleep and enjoy Shabbat, because the entire city, when you came in, beheter, when you came in, being allowed to do so, is considered like one room. Even if they left you behind the doors of the city, behind the walls of the city, outside, you could come in. Because you have the allowance of traveling with your caravan on Shabbat, and therefore what you're doing is fine. The kevan, says the Shulchan Aruch, the ledvar mitzvah nafik, once you came out for mitzvah, yesh lo 2,000 amah lechol ruach, you have 2,000 amot from every direction, and that obviously includes getting into the town as well. So as soon as you're within Tchum, you could enter the town, and once you enter the town, you have the whole town. Now the Ramah adds on this, Yeshomrim, Shekol makom shadam holech, this chora, any place that you enter and you go for business, for schora, or lirot pnei chavero, or you're going to see your friend, is that considered mitzvah or not? I'm doing business to support my family. I'm going to see my friend to create and reinvigorate my relationship with him, right? Chaverim makshivim, I love him, he loves me, and the way we maintain and cherish and develop that relationship is by me visiting him, he visits me. So it's an element of mitzvah, right? Is that mutar or not mutar? right? This is something that the modern psychologists would say. Well, nowadays we understand that a person visiting a person means a lot. It could change their mood, and the mood could, the chain of effects of how things work. We understand those things much better nowadays, but Chazal knew this forever, and therefore the halacha is, if you have such scenario, chashuv hakol dvar mitzvah, it's all considered dvar mitzvah. Ve'eno chashuv dvar harashut rak sholech letayel. Only when you're going for fun, to take a walk, it does not involve anyone else. You're just going to walk around, or any other tiyul. That is when it's asur. But if you're doing a mitzvah, it's mutar, and visiting your friend is a mitzvah, and doing business for the sorch of your parnasa also is considered mitzvah. והליכת שיירה תוך 3 ימים כן כי חושבים הכל לדבר מצווה. And this halacha of the Ramah, that there are those places that have a minhag. Al ken nahagו בקצת מקומות. There are certain cities that have a minhag, clear minhag, להקל בעניין הפלגת ספינות, to be more lenient for traveling on a ship and with a caravan, because they hold that this is all for Dvar Mitzvah. This is all for Dvar Mitzvah, and therefore it will be mutar. That basically is the minhag of some places, as we discuss. Again, we will leave some of the details of this because of the nature of it not being as relevant to us, but the Shulchan Aruch is pretty clear of the details of what he discusses, and we'll discuss and continue this next Siman Resh Mem Tet in the days to come. Chazak u'Baruch.